There was a time when PlayStation seemed to be an untouchable household name. Despite the console quote-unquote flops, grimy behind-the-scenes business practices, overall whack decisions, and weaker console hardware, this landmark name in the game industry was still the name your parents or grandparents ended up calling every console in your home. Throughout time, Sony's big console brand would keep growing until it felt as if it couldn't grow anymore. It felt infallible, like nothing could hurt the PlayStation name. Well, nothing except PlayStation itself. In recent years, it feels as if PlayStation has been out to tarnish its own legacy through a myriad of weird choices and ways its bigwigs think will print out easy money. So let's sit through that nostalgic PlayStation intro and take a look at the rise and fall of one of gaming's biggest juggernauts. The beginning of PlayStation's brand is no longer a big secret or mystery. The console began as a joint venture with Nintendo. That all began when Ken Kutaragi, a Sony executive at the time, opened a partnership between the company and Nintendo without Sony even knowing. Due to Kutaragi's interest in gaming via watching his daughter play Nintendo's Famicom, he got Nintendo to adopt his sound processor, the SPC 700, and the Super Nintendo. While this act almost lost him his job at Sony, Kutaragi was ultimately praised by the president, and the company would continue to work with Nintendo in the future. Come 1988, Nintendo would contract Sony to create the famed CD-ROM edition for their console arsenal, resulting in the SNES CD or PlayStation. Funny enough, PlayStation was actually a name already taken by the company Yamaha, but Sony's then chairman, Nobuyuki Ide, whose last name I probably butchered, liked the name so much that he just bought it from them. Sony and Nintendo would hype the heck out of the upcoming CD add-on behind the scenes, but Nintendo's president at the time, Hiroshi Yamauchi, realized that the agreed upon contract between the two companies gave Sony too much power, and ultimately, he canceled their deal behind Sony's back, only unveiling to the world at CES that Sony and Nintendo had broken up, and Nintendo had been sleeping with Philips behind their back. I wonder how that partnership ended up. What Nintendo didn't know was that it just created another competitor in the gaming space that only it, Sega, and the slowly rising PC game space had control over. Nintendo's betrayal led Sony to create its own console with drugs and hookers. Well, that last part wouldn't come until the PlayStation 2. But before that, Sony went to Sega with a proposal to team up. According to the Sega of America CEO, Tom Kalinske, Sega would decline due to the board saying, "That's a stupid idea. Sony doesn't know how to make hardware. They don't know how to make software either. Why would we want to do this?" I'm sorry, but I died laughing so many times reading that. Sony didn't get the warmest of welcomes. They were not interested, said Kutaragi in an NME interview. They just said, "Don't do it. There were multiple companies and none of them were successful. You are going to fail." That's what they told us. Even within Sony, no one believed that we would be successful, he added. Kutaragi, despite his hard work, began to be hated by many inside of Sony for putting them in this mess. Sony cut all ties with Nintendo on May the 4th of 1992, and Kutaragi continued pushing towards a gaming future with Sony. That same year, Kutaragi would show off a secret he'd been working on, like he was Tony Stark in Iron Man 1.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
A new CD-ROM system that could present higher-end 3D graphics. Many Sony executives didn't want to continue in the game space and wanted the company to stay in its lane. However, Kutaragi went up to Sony's then chairman, Norio Oga, and just said, "We're just going to let Nintendo do us like that?" To which Oga responded, "Hell no. Well, they didn't say exactly that, but that's basically how it went. Sony would go on to develop their landmark console and used all assets possible to ensure a good launch and a successful project. Not having any game development experience, it enlisted the aid of third-party devs to create the PlayStation's library. They learned from the mistakes of other failed ventures like the Jaguar and the 3DO, and made sure they got actual good developers too, not just Johnny Donuts from across the street. Funny enough, to the surprise of no one, there were more players in the space that weren't fans of Nintendo and their business practices, and they instantly joined PlayStation's dev side. Two of the big companies that initially were present were Konami and Namco, so you know that this console was going to be a banger. The console would begin its legacy showing off cutting-edge technology, bringing Tekken, Ridge Racer, Mortal Kombat 3, and more to home consoles, and focusing on the PlayStation not being associated with being a toy like Nintendo was. The world was blown away with PlayStation's 1994 launch, selling 100,000 units on the first day and 300 by the end of the year. That success would continue and PlayStation would become a household name and a very important console, being the first to truly break the barrier of gaming being perceived as a thing for children and associated with toys. This was done not only through the look, vibe, library, and other business choices, but through an advertisement campaign based on rave and club culture, which was very hip at the time. PlayStation got a taste of success with the PlayStation 1 and it was starving for more. The year 2000 would see the global release of the PlayStation 2, which is easily its most popular console ever. This is the one, guys. This is the one that truly cemented PlayStation and the legacy we loved it for. I could talk forever about the games I spent time on this bad boy with. Kingdom Hearts, the iToy, Ape Escape, the best game of all time, God Hand. But let me get back to the story instead. After the PlayStation 1, Sony was seen as the king of the gaming market, overshadowing the competition that Nintendo and Sega presented with their mid-Nintendo 64 and the Sega Saturn consoles. Now it was time to take it to the next level. At the time of the PlayStation 1's launch in 1994, Kutaragi had already begun working on the PlayStation 2. 1997 brought news that the console would have PS1 backwards compatibility and feature a DVD player. And finally, in 1999, Sony would announce that the PS2 would release the next year, unveiling it at the Tokyo Game Show with a showcase featuring Tekken Tag Tournament. The PS2 obviously blew its competition out of the water, becoming one of, if not the best-selling consoles of all time. Through its additions like being a DVD player, it was adopted by more than just gamers. The console would go on to keep that fan base by keeping a more mature vibe than the rest, hosting games like Grand Theft Auto, Metal Gear, God of War, Need for Speed, Resident Evil, and a lot more. However, PlayStation would start to show some cracks in this era as well, by notoriously being home to the worst running ports in the industry at the time. The console was a pain to develop for. The PS2 used a plethora of chips, processors, and functions that would help its heart, the emotion engine, run the console. It used all these features in tandem, swapping from processor to processor constantly. This caused games to have poor frame rates, load times, graphics, audio quality, and more when compared to their counterparts. This issue was notorious for Resident Evil 4, the Sonic games, the Dreamcast ported games, and more. Some of these weren't even supposed to happen until PlayStation allegedly decided to get a bit mischievous, a little grimy. It's a well-known legend that Sony told companies like Sega and Capcom to release their games on the PS2 or they'll never be able to publish on Sony consoles again. A proposition that no one would say no to, and one that would land Sega in the spot of publishing games once planned only for Xbox and GameCube, like Sonic Heroes, to the PlayStation 2 in worse condition. Remember, this is all alleged, so the PS3 continued to show the cracks in Sony's console empire. Once again, the console was difficult to develop for, resulting in the same issues of the past. This resulted in things such as the fighting game community largely moving to the Xbox 360 for their competitive needs, as it ran smoother, which is needed for a good fighting game experience. It also lacked early titles, which began the joke of PlayStation having no games, and to be fair, kind of factual until the end of the PS3's lifespan.
Give me my dying words to my wife. I just want you to know, PS3 has no games.
Sony, I'm getting pissed. $600 I paid for this. PlayStation has no freaking games.
And that initial price of $599 you see, I even cracked up reading it there. It was a hard pill to swallow. Suddenly gamers weren't too keen on PlayStation, with many largely considering the 360 to be the big winner of that gaming era.
Just keep playing my 360. Hope this song has helped you understand. Now you know how you killed your brand.
In 2013, the PlayStation 4 would see the playing field even after a lackluster addition to PlayStation's library with the PlayStation 3, and Xbox firmly cementing itself into the gaming world. While this era of PlayStation wouldn't bring anything too damning or groundbreaking, it would see PlayStation winning the hearts of gamers and having somewhat of a simultaneous descent. With the reveal of the PS4 and the Xbox One, Microsoft had buried itself in negativity with its infamous DRM controversy. PlayStation immediately took advantage, making comedic videos like how to share games on the PlayStation 4, which consisted simply of giving another person the game via the disc. Meanwhile, Xbox made itself look bad by pushing those new DRM policies that presented hurdles to sharing titles between users and consoles, which it would soon drop. Aside from this, PlayStation had stumbled on something that it was doing better than anyone out there: cinematic titles that put story, acting, and graphics before gameplay. Their big hit, The Last of Us, made this their main focus for a long time. But there were other games like LA Noire, Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, and more. They made money, gained press, and opened Sony's eyes to something new that would plague the industry for years and send PlayStation in a new direction. This pushed the company to completely recreate games like their God of War series into a more big-budget cinematic and story-focused experience. This trend would go on to continue into the PlayStation 5 generation with huge ramifications. Along with this development, PlayStation would be introduced to the success of live service games through titles like Fortnite and Overwatch. These two things would begin the out-of-touch era of PlayStation. Going into the PS5 era, PlayStation has been seeing a lot of success, but a lot of loss and goodwill from its fan base and beyond. This all started with Sony's closure of one of its most legendary teams due to underperformance on April 1st of 2021. Japan Studios, the group behind hits like Ape Escape, Gravity Rush, Jumping Flash, Parappa the Rapper, Wild Arms, Ghost in the Shell, and underrated masterpiece by the way, Everybody's Golf, Bloodborne, Knack Baby, and Astro's Playroom. If you play any of these games listed, then you know why this is such a blow to PlayStation's public perception during a time when it seemed that the company cared more about dropping another movie game instead of actual fun experience such as some of these. In an IGN Japan interview, former PlayStation boss Sean Layden stated that it was no surprise that Studio Japan was shut down, with some of its former team members being added to Team Asobi. That was sad, he said. It wasn't necessarily a surprise. I loved Alan Becker, former head of Japan Studio, and he worked really hard, but there was so much legacy malaise. It's tough when the studio hasn't had a hit for a while, then they forget how that feels. You know, if you had a hit once, it's like a drug. You're chasing the next one, right? And then if you don't have that one for a while, you forget what it felt like. And then you start to forget how you get there. There were probably two roads. One was the road they took. The other road was maybe a real tough love program. And maybe that's what the Team Asobi thing is. It's like pruning a bonsai, right? You get it back down to its nub and see if you can grow it back out again. While there was a reason behind Studio Japan's closure, it didn't stop fans from hating the decision and beginning to believe that PlayStation was losing touch with the core of gaming. This was continued when PlayStation finally found its next big hit in Helldivers 2, a game that blew up into its own community instantly, full of fun, laughter, and bug guts. That's until PlayStation pulled back the curtain and reminded everyone that this was still a corporate product. Helldivers 2 initially released as a $40 live service title for both PS5 and PC through Steam. However, when the product first released in February of 2024 on PC, players were able to buy and play using their Steam account alone. That May, PlayStation would claim the grace period was over, and players were then required to make a PSN to play via their PCs. While at face value, this seems like no big deal, it actually raised huge issues for players that had already forked over the $40. There are actually many countries not supported by PSN, over 100 in fact, including the Dominican Republic, Ghana, Haiti, Jamaica, and more. So basically they got robbed. Plus, not everyone wants their email filled with PlayStation's corny ass marketing. The whole debacle hurt the good fortune and faith that players had in Helldivers 2, resulting in a mass negative reviewing and refund requesting of the game, which really hurt in the long run. PlayStation would drop the PC requirements soon after getting slapped in the face, but for many the damage had been done, and the game was delisted in many countries where PSN isn't available. The next instance of PlayStation's out-of-touch nature came with the Concord debacle. Concord was a big-budget hero shooter that PlayStation planned to get back into the live service game with. I'm sure you've heard of it by now, so I'll just hop to the meat and potatoes. See, Concord was in development for reportedly 8 years with a budget of over $100 million. However, upon open beta and full release, numbers struggled to hit any meaningful marks, peaking at about around 700 on Steam. When the game was initially revealed, it didn't do anything wrong, but nothing right either. To me, it just screamed, hey, we put our money in, now make us some money by playing our uninspired live service game. And in a world where the hero shooting and live service game spaces are full already of great offerings, even giving us a game with my favorite comic book character ever, Magic, my beloved. As a playable character, it's not easy just to expect everyone to jump ship. Concord had no style, had no grace. This game fell right on its face and PlayStation was slapped once again with a huge failure. This failure was followed by another in LEGO Horizon Adventures, a game no one asked for, by the way. No Horizon fans, no LEGO fans, no one. LEGO Horizon hit a peak of 602 players on launch on Steam. Sony even released it on Nintendo Switch to target a younger audience, and not even they wanted to play it. While not a bad business move this time around, PlayStation once again made themselves to be the butt of the joke back in 2024 with the announcement of the PlayStation 5 Pro. This upgraded console plays all the same games as the PS5, but it's a simple mid-generational enhancement, only boosting the graphical capabilities of an already powerful console. Many were blown away at the audacity of PlayStation dropping this and spoke on the blatant money-making practices and preying on loyal PlayStation fans and the holiday purchasers. While we don't have the exact PS5 Pro numbers, we do have info that it boosted the overall PS5 sales to over 4 million worldwide. While it did make PlayStation keep looking money hungry, it was apparently a success. The most recent controversy that landed PlayStation in the dunce cap again was the report of the company shutting down the game by Bluepoint, the team behind various PlayStation games and remasters. But this time no one was mad a game was shut down, but about the game that PlayStation had them working on. That game was a live service God of War game, along with another live service game by Ben Studio. Not much is known about these games, and I doubt anyone really cares. All I know is that no one was happy about the waste of time and talent that PlayStation put forward once again to try and chase the live service bag, instead of actually presenting us with a well-made project that everyone knows it can. Despite these shortcomings, PlayStation continues to be a powerful force in the gaming industry, reminding us of their past with the great Astrobot by Team Asobi and games they bought time exclusivity for, like Stellar Blade and Final Fantasy. Jokes aside, the point is that while PlayStation has had more mess ups in the most recent era than before, the company is still far from a failure, with the PS5 selling over 60 million consoles worldwide. As we look at PlayStation's journey, it's clear that this once untouchable giant has faced some tough times, from industry-leading innovations to questionable decisions. It's undeniable that Sony's PlayStation brand has undergone a shift, one that's left fans both excited and frustrated at the same time. Yet, despite these ups and downs, PlayStation remains a powerhouse in gaming, with millions of consoles sold and a legacy that still resonates with players worldwide. The question is, can PlayStation reclaim its former glory and strike the right balance between innovation and fan appreciation? Only time will tell, but for now, it's clear that the PlayStation name is far from done, and its story is still unfolding. That's it from me. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this. I got a lot more coming weekly, and thank you so much to everyone who sat through this whole thing. It was a blast to make, and I hope I get to make more sooner than later. So with all that said, take care.